I wanted to briefly introduce our host. From Madison Avenue to Middle America, Matthew's writings have been published in a variety of topics ranging from business, economics, to lifestyles and media history. He currently serves as host of By the Book, a weekly author-themed talk radio series presenting long-form conversations with notable nonfiction authors. His broadcast work has been featured via ABC, Pacifica, NPR, and PRX, and his print journalism has appeared in publications ranging from Opera News to the Daily Mail, UPI, ESPN, and scores of others. So please join me in welcoming our host, Matthew Worley.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you for the microphone. Normally at this time, I would probably read a bio for our guest, but in this case, we have something so much better, and we have an AV guy here somewhere to give it to us. Carson?
He was the first entertainment reporter in the history of television news. He is a media trailblazer who gave us new insights on why movies matter and how movie stars really think and feel. He's an innovative game changer who has interviewed every major movie star then and now. His name is David Sheehan. He's here now on Sheehan and the Stars, ready to share some very special Hollywood moments and celebrate the humanity of celebrity.
David Sheehan, Entertainment.
Our David Sheehan went to the star-studded premiere tonight. Now he's back to tell us all about it.
All about it, yes.
Mr. Sheehan here balances some pluses and minuses.
A truly eye-opening look at love and friendship put to the test. Does it get into your mind?
I'm happy, whatever happens.
And that's how you introduce it, Dave. You say, Bob, it's good to see you still standing.
But don't you think I'm odd looking?
No, I would not use the word odd. You are now said to be the most powerful leading lady in Hollywood today.
I feel opportunity, but I don't necessarily feel power.
Do you feel like you're mellowing now at this point in your life?
Well, I think it's about time. Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
This is wonderful stuff.
You were the happiest Oscar winner I've ever seen.
Well, I tell you, this is what it is. It's an incredibly personal moment.
You know what the Oscar race is all about, or at least from a personal standpoint, right?
Only thing better than having one is having two.
No. Yeah, you see.
It's a big thing when the actors say, yes, you.
Not that you're better than anybody, but that for that year and that moment, you know, you were pretty good. And it doesn't mean you're always going to be. It just meant for that moment on that movie, at that time, the stars were aligned in the right way for you.
Gee, that was well put. You know, we ask these questions all the time. That was one of the best answers I've ever heard. Very good. My compliments.
Thank you.
David Sheehan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So in doing research for our chat, and I think we talked with this on the phone too, I learned that you are from Ohio.
Columbus, Ohio.
And well, that's even better.
Purebred, all-American. Yes.
And you went to Ohio State to begin your
Ohio State, Notre Dame,
career.
and UCLA.
So when I think about Ohio and people in this room who are broadcasters, we think of, you mentioned Columbus, some major media markets where some really serious broadcast talent came from. Mike Douglas, Donahue, a number of others. And Ohio State really had a serious media program where a lot of famous people came out of it. How did you, I think you wanted to be a print guy before you wanted to be a broadcaster. How did your interest in all this form as a kid?
I had a hemorrhaged kidney. I didn't know I was going to answer it that way. I swear this is, I'm not used to this. I'm used to asking the questions. And so I'm kind of nervous, actually, to tell you the truth, because the interviewer gets interviewed. That's but anyway, a hemorrhaged kidney is what did it. I was a football star at St. Charles Borromeo High School in Columbus, Ohio, which, by the way, is the #1 test market in the country right now, where any new product is tested in Columbus, Ohio, and if it clicks in Columbus, they manufacture it. It used to be, how will it play in Peoria, but now it's Columbus, Ohio, #1. Just last month, that was determined. Anyway, so I was kind of like a football star, not really a star, but I was a crazy, what did they call me, crashing linebacker, because I was fearless and a little nuts. But in the process of that, some guy, bigger guy, you know, kicked me in the side, and I had a hemorrhaged kidney, and the doctors said no more football. So I went to the Columbus Dispatch, which was the biggest newspaper, you know, like for a kid, That's a big deal, man. But I went down there with my crutches and everything, and I said, I just got canceled. But I'm a good writer because I was editor of the school paper and president of the class and stuff like that. And so some guy took a liking to me, and he said, okay, go ahead, you cover high school sports. And I said, all right, because earlier on, my dad had taught me to read by taking me through the daily newspaper. And then one day, I don't know how old I was then, 5 or 6, I said, Dad, what does BY mean? And he said, what? All these stories, there's a BY in front of the guy's name. Oh, he said, that's a byline. Oh, that's what I want. That was age 5 or 6. And as a result of the hemorrhage kidney, I got a byline. I got many bylines. And, hello? And what was the question? Oh, yeah, how did I get into print? That's how I got into print. And then I developed kind of a writing style. I went to a lot of writer-journalist workshops on Buckeye Lake, in Indian Lake. I don't know why they always had them on lakes, but that's Ohio. And I guess I learned, and then I became a writer for Esquire, Mademoiselle, Playboy, and interviewed Henry Miller, the author of Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, became his friend, actually. And that got me some credentials. And then I worked for UPI, United Press International, which I don't think is around anymore, but Associated Press, and a giant newspaper called the Evening Outlook in Santa Monica, California. but still, it was a nice gig, and I got to meet Sinatra and Peter Lawford as a result of that. They took me to the Kennedy inauguration, and I got to take my dad with me, and we were in the third row looking up at, ask not what you know, that whole thing. So, but all along, writing, under journalistic assignment. But I could never get a job except the one at the Evening Outlook, which was pretty small potatoes, right? But UPI would never hire me, neither would AP. So I was a dedicated stringer. So when I got the inside friendship kind of thing with Sinatra and Lawford and the guys, the so-called Rat Pack, boy, I was a high-price stringer. They tripled my fee, per story fee, which was, I don't remember what it was, I think $75. But for that story, I got triple. And I followed them around the California campaign trail with JFK, who was having sex with Marilyn Monroe, as a matter of fact, and I caught them. I did, really, at Peter Lawford's house on the beach at Pacific Coast Highway. It was quite a sight, I got to tell you. It's embedded in my mind. I'll never lose that. It's like a little trailer that keeps running whenever I think of it, which is not that often, but I just did, didn't I?
Well, let's pick up some of that.
Pardon?
Some of the stuff you're giving us tersely, let's discuss it in a little more detail. You end up in Los Angeles, you go to UCLA, I think you graduated from there, and at some point you begin writing for the Evening Outlook, the Beverly Hills Courier. Were you covering entertainment for these papers, or were you just covering general assignments?
Well, I think the first step is how I ever got to L.A.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Because after I became a non-football star, I decided I was going to become a priest. And so I went into a preparatory seminary, and then it was at St. Charles, and across the creek was St. Mary's, so girls and boys separated, right? But yeah, one day a young lady in her plaid skirt and white saddle shoes stood across the creek and said, "Hi, you're kind of cute." I said, "What?" I was in a cassock, a long black priest robe, because we all had to wear those in class if we're seminarians. She said, I said, "Oh, cute? What do you mean?" I wonder, what do you have under your cassock? And I was so naive, I did not in any way, shape, or form understand the question. And I pulled up my cassock and said, "My trousers." And she laughed like a crazy woman. And I couldn't understand what she was laughing at. But she said, "I think I better come over the bridge and show you what I meant." And anyway, she did. And then I ran to the prefect and said, what are the chances of getting a waiver on that celibacy thing? Because I just discovered, I just discovered something I think I kind of like, thanks to Mary Lou. And she showed me how to discover her too. So I think I have opening a new chapter. And I don't like the celibacy. It's good. So anyway, we got in a fight, and I left. Then I went to Ohio State, and that was crazy. And then I didn't like that either, so I went to Notre Dame. And that was good, but that was so Catholic, and I rebelled against that. And then one day at Notre Dame, I started writing there because I was doing stuff for the South Bend Tribune, as I had with the Columbus Dispatch beforehand. And at Notre Dame, one day, I don't know if any of you remember a magazine called Life magazine. It was a big, like, I don't know what size, but larger than Time. And on the front page was a picture of a girl who looked so much like Mary Lou from the Creek. Again, plaid skirt, white saddle shoes, and carrying books under her nice, beautifully white bloused bosom. And there was, she was obviously on a campus. And I tried to determine what campus. And it was Royce Hall at UCLA. That's where I'm going, man. So I got the hell out from under the Catholic thing. And my parents at the time said, you cannot just get in your car, which was an old Dodge, and drive across the country. You're too young and it's too dangerous, and I will not allow you to do that. I'm sorry. And I said, well, okay. So what about, can I fly? We can't afford an airline. Well, I'll take a train. There's no train from Columbus, but you have to go to Cleveland to get the train. I don't know. Anyway, I talked my uncle, who was a priest, into driving me across the country because his fantasy was to spend one day in Las Vegas, take his collar off and be crazy. And so his bucket list got fulfilled, and I got driven across the country in my old Dodge by my uncle, the priest. Linus Dury was his name. And so I got out here, and that's when the answer to your question begins to have more flesh. I didn't have any means of support. My dad was a factory worker. He was a published poet, speaking of Life magazine and Saturday Evening Post, but you couldn't support a family on that because they paid you like $100 per poem. And so he had a factory job as a metallurgist at Columbus Bolton Forging, and he couldn't afford to send me to school or to get me across the country or anything else. I mean, he made a contribution all the way along, but I got a job on a newspaper called the Santa Monica Evening Outlook, and as you said, Beverly Hills Courier, the South Bay, there are a whole bunch of what they called suburban papers in those days. I don't think they exist anymore, do they?
Beverly Hills Courier is still around. Yeah.
Oh, really?
The Outlook is gone.
Yeah. But anyway, that gave me a reason to write almost daily because I needed the paycheck because I couldn't pay the bill at the fraternity house. I pledged Kappa Sig in order to have a place to live. But there was expenses in that, so I had to write for money. And but it was fun, and I learned how to, have fun with it. What was the question?
Well, let's talk about getting the gig at UPI. You mentioned Frank Sinatra a moment ago. Peter Lawford owned a restaurant in Beverly Hills called Puccini's. I don't know if anyone recalls that or not.
How'd you know that?
Research, right?
Oh, very good.
Anyway, the point is, at some point, one evening, Sinatra, who probably had money in the restaurant, got involved in some kind of a scuffle with a parking lot attendant, something like that.
The whole story.
And you covered that for one of the community papers, and I think this helped you get to UPI. Talk about that.
Well, I just happened to be there, and I just happened to be there that night, but I didn't know him, and I'm a reporter, but I'm not going to go up to him because I had no question to ask him. God damn, that's Frank Sinatra. Jesus Christ, he's big. He's a star. And then I got wind of what was going on out there in the parking lot, a big battle with the parking lot guy who told Sinatra to F off, and Sinatra didn't like that, or I don't know what exactly happened, but I interviewed the parking lot guy who said he was so sorry that he was out of line. And then I put that in the paper because the other papers were saying Sinatra is a hothead, crazy guy, probably drunk or on drugs. And I went in the other direction. I said, oh, I interviewed the parking lot attendant who was involved in the altercation, and he said no, he was out of line. He was having a frustrating day, and Sinatra said, "Where's my damn car?" And he told Sinatra, "F off." And so Sinatra was just being Sinatra. He wasn't doing anything evil. Anyway, they took, I can't remember the whole paragraph, because there's 3 or 4 paragraphs, and Sinatra and his people took that to heart and invited me for lunch at Peter Lawford's house on the Coast Highway, which is where I met Sinatra, and Dean Martin, I think, was there. Can't remember if Sammy was there at that time. And then I went to future lunches there. I became kind of the mascot because I was this young kid with a blonde crew cut haircut. I looked like, I don't know, Ichabod Crane or something. And they thought I was cute, and they felt very grateful and obliged to me for having stood up for Frank Sinatra, who was always being bashed by the press. And so that's how I met JFK and caught him in the bedroom with Marilyn Monroe. I mean, not caught. I wasn't looking for him. I was just going to the bathroom, I think. And whoa, excuse me. That was, see, that's embedded. It just keeps coming back. I don't know what it is. I guess that's one of my more symptomatic images. So, did I answer the question yet?
I think you did.
Okay.
Now, it is from your work in print and magazines and newspapers that you get into television. And one of the interesting things about this is, and we talked about this on the phone, that you actually made a pitch and sent in some, I guess, samples, clips, or whatever, to, I think, all of the local stations, or several of them, and you were making a pitch that you wanted to, I guess, produce content, but you actually got a gig on the air. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story of a major mistake. But before we get into that, when is Shadow Stevens here? Where? Right here. Right here. Right. You don't look like Shadow Stevens. Did you get older? Yeah. What? How'd that happen? 97 this week. No kidding. Well, how come you got older and I didn't? I don't understand. The voice on that clip that you just, how did you open that? David Sheehan, what'd you call it?
It was a long time ago. I was very enthusiastic.
Do you remember your copy? No. Some kind of changer, a life changer? No. Anyway, that was his voice. Shadow Stevens, also the intro voice to a guy named Craig Ferguson for how many years? Late night, that was CBS? Yeah, and a voice of so many commercials. Say a few words, Shadow, like in the Shadow Stevens voice. Hi, I'm Shadow Stevens, and you're not. Right. Anyway, thank you again for ever doing that. Can you believe it's haunting us now in 2019? There you are. I couldn't believe it. But speaking of that, this is, I think, a landmark moment now, because I'm going to reveal something I have never revealed because I didn't know to reveal it. And thanks to Paul Brownstein, the #1 television, vintage television distributor in the entire world, who's sitting over there, I've been involved in a lie for approximately 47 years or something like that, which is a long lie. And coming from Ohio and being a rebel, my highest priority of, I suppose, anything is honesty and never, ever telling a lie. And here I discovered just last week that I've been party to not a earth-shaking lie, but a definite lie for 47 years. Because as the Shadow said in the opening thing, the first entertainment reporter in the history of television. Well, that was laid on me by CBS when I started, because it was a big thing. In those days, there were no entertainment reporters, or so they thought. But Paul Brownstein pointed out that there was one in New York named Pat Collins in 1969, which was 1 year before I started. And so, pardon?
She was in Boston.
Oh, Boston, okay. Boston, New York, the East Coast. But I didn't know that, and CBS here didn't know that, and they claimed that I was the very first entertainment reporter on a regular nightly newscast in the history of television, which it says right there. See, so Shadow, you're part of the lie too. But we didn't know. And I'm telling the truth. Now, it was only last week when Paul Brownstein pointed out, it's not totally true, you know, David. What? And so, I don't know, we're going to have to re-record, I guess, which means you make more money. It's okay, we'll work that out. Anyway, so I wanted to get that off my chest.
Well, let's pick up how, regardless of who was first, how you, 1970, you go to KNXT. It's your first news.
No, I didn't go there. What happened was I was producing theater because I got tired of just writing about it, and I wanted to do it. One of the things I did as a writer was cover entertainment. In one place I had a restaurant column and all kinds of nightlife things. But I did theater reviews, small theater, you know, off-Broadway, what they call equity waiver, and then HAT, Hollywood Area Theater, equity plays. And one play that kept popping up was The Zoo Story by Edward Albee, and I would review, and I would start to think, I could do better than that. So I went around the theaters auditioning, but nobody would hire me. So I opened my own theater and put myself in the role in The Zoo Story, along with Albee Almanac and Sandbox and American Family, which were all Albee plays. So then, just as I was opening, Albee wins the Pulitzer Prize for A Delicate Balance, comes to UCLA to receive it, and comes to my little theater on Pico Boulevard for a press conference. So a lot of luck. And so during that experience, I called all the papers, all the TV stations, get somebody down here. We got Edward Albee. He just won the Pulitzer Prize. He's going to sit on the apron of my stage and talk to the press about what does A Delicate Balance really mean, or what does The Zoo Story really mean, or Tiny Alice, or any other of his many plays. And there was nobody, not one camera crew showed up. And I was very frustrated, but it gave me an idea. I called the assignment editors, the managing editors of the TV station's news department, news directors even. Why did you ignore Edward Albee? His feelings are hurt, and so are mine. But explain to me, how do you make those decisions? Not one crew showed up, not from any station. Well, we don't have anybody covering that. There's nobody on that beat. Oh, really? Okay, thank you very much. And then I sat down and wrote a pitch on paper on an old Royal typewriter. This was before the days of internet, email, Word doc, or any of that stuff. And I wrote a 2-page presentation. All it said was, you really should have an entertainment reporter. After all, we're in Los Angeles, the entertainment capital of the world, and you have no entertainment reporter. Unbelievable. I think you should have that. And I'd like to nominate myself to produce the segment because I have credentials, and I showed them the Esquire magazine and all the UPI and all that stuff, so I had a certain amount of entree. And they all three said, yeah, let's go. And I ended up wanting to go with CBS because they were most paternalistic, because I didn't know anything about television, hadn't the faintest idea how you do a story or what editing means, or in those days it was 16 millimeter mag stripe. It was no videotape yet. And I said, how am I going to learn that? And CBS was the place where I felt most at home with the idea that they have to teach me besides pay me. So that's where I went. So I went into the final meeting with the general manager, news director, assistant director. I remember their names: Bill Ames, Al Greenstein, and it was at 6121 Sunset Boulevard, Gower and Sunset back in the day when the studios was there. And we had a great meeting. They said, okay, we're going to start this. Everybody's against you, Huh? What? Everybody in the news department is against you. They think it's fluffy bullshit. They don't want. This is a news organization, not an entertainment gossip rag. No, I'm not going to do gossip. Well, anyway, you got a lot of opposition, so we're going to start you just on weekends to see how it goes. I said, oh, okay, that's no problem. And we're going to pay you, what it was an astronomical sum for me. I can't remember. It was like $5,000 a weekend. Wow, that's more than I made a year a couple of times. And so they started me off. But the key thing was in the meeting, they said they would start the segment off on weekends only. And but before we can confirm and put any signatures on a piece of paper, we have to have you come in for a screen test. There's nobody, we don't have studio availability. So can you come in on Saturday for a screen test during the afternoon time when we're down? And I started to say, oh, no, you don't understand. I'm not the on-the-air guy. I'm the producer-writer. I'm not a talent. But I shut myself up. Oh, they have misunderstood. How about that? What a mistake. And so that's a true story, and that's how it all started. I never did tell them that because they went other places and other directions with their lives, and one of them died, which is, definitely another direction. But that's how it started, and I did a screen test, knowing nothing about how to do that, because I never did that. And it was my first experience with a teleprompter. And a teleprompter in those days was long rolls of yellow paper, like a teletype machine paper, on 2 rolls, with a guy on the side of the camera cranking the rolls. That was a teleprompter. So I had to write copy for my test, for my screen test, that would fit on there. And I chose a movie with, who was it? What's her name? Candice Bergen, called T.R. Baskin. That was my screen test. And I did a little short review just so they could see what I looked like on camera and how my voice sounded and whether I could read a teleprompter with the guy cranking. And they were real nice. They gave me a couple of rehearsals. And anyway, I got the job, as you can see.
So this is 1970.
Yeah.
This is KNXT, as probably most people in this room know as broadcasters. KNXT was coming to, they probably didn't know it then, coming to the end of a dramatic ratings run with a program called The Big News. Jerry Dunphy is host. So when you're coming into this, you're not just coming into a CBS, you're coming into a legendary, really a news program that in this market, at 6 o'clock, if you look at the numbers, this city stopped for The Big News in KNXT.
Yeah, 11 too, yeah.
And the famous Jerry Dunphy, who was a staple in this market for years.
He taught me how to read the teleprompter, Jerry.
That's what I was going to ask you. Talk about that. What kind of tips did he give you? What did you think about that?
I've had so many people teach me how to read the teleprompter because I guess I never really got really good at it. The key thing when you're reading teleprompter, you don't want the audience, the viewer, to see you reading. You don't want that. It's a disconnect. And Jerry was my first teacher. He said, you can't look at the words. I said, how can I read it if I can't look at the words? I didn't understand anything. Walter Cronkite in New York once tried to teach me. So did Rather. And so did Fritz Coleman, who doesn't ever use teleprompter. He tried to teach me, and I think he was the most successful in terms of teaching when I went to NBC. And the key thing was you got to look through the words. You can have the words connect to your brain, but it's a kind of a visual, cerebral, ocular combo that's sort of tricky to really get good at it. But I don't know if I got good at it or not, but I know it was a career-long struggle reading the teleprompter. And Jerry Dunphy was a dear man, a little overboard on the drinking, but that's okay, I guess. I don't know if it's okay or not. It's not for me to say what it's okay, but he was nice to me and took time after the show to, hey, can you stay a minute there, cameraman and prompter operator? Just for 5 minutes, I want to show Sheehan something because he doesn't know what he's doing. Thank you very much. And so he would take time after the newscast in the studio to give me pointers on how you read through the words and don't read the words, which completely confused me because I never understood. How could you read through the words if you're not reading? How can you say the words? Because you're supposed to be talking like as though it's natural conversation. Anyway, it took me a while, but I'd say I got the idea in about 20 years. It took me about 20 years. No, it really did. It took me, if I ever, to look at something, if I ever got it, I don't know. Sometimes I do better when I'm not reading. I just ad lib. And sometimes I said, no prompter today, and I had notes. And yeah, I just saw this movie, and boy, does it suck. And I'll tell you why it sucks. And so, yeah.
So speaking about Dunphy, because he was such a legendary anchorman, he was on the air until probably 15 years ago, pretty recently. Al Primo, who many of you in this room will know as the man who created Eyewitness News, Primo said that when he was head of news for the ABC O&O stations, that when they were negotiating with Dunphy to go to ABC, the Dunphy had some very grand demands. He had to have a limo to drive him to work.
Yeah.
He had to have a credit card in his name, unlimited, paid by the station that he would give no accounting for. His wife had to have a credit card. So you get a sense of a guy who was it's a pretty big ego, but you say he was a nice guy to you. So what are your general thoughts on Dunphy? You say he drank heavily, but beyond that. Was he
I don't know. But my years with Dunphy, remember, that was when I was just beginning. I was so scared to death. I had no room to judge anybody else. I was trying to, self-preservation and learn what I could and what does it mean to do a news report? And what do you mean I have to do it in 1:45? What's 1:45? Well, it's a little less than 2 minutes. But what happens if I go over that? You get fired eventually, because if you go over it, you're taking time away from sports, and sports is what really rules the game. Really? Does it? Okay. What about the news? Well, of course. Anyway, my impression of him at this moment is a dear man. He hugged me. He said, because he could see, he'd been broadcasting for how many years, way before he met me. And he could see my fear in my combination of enthusiasm, excitement, and scared to death at the same time. This young kid, and he empathized with that. And to me, that's a dear person who does that. He had nothing to gain. He was not doing anything for any quid pro quo. It just came out of his heart. So that's my memory of him. I don't know what else he's done or not done, but. Except he used to take me out for scotch, and I said, I can't do that. I can't go on the air after. No. He says, well, I can. Okay. So he didn't teach me that part because I wasn't willing to learn. But he taught me all the other things.
Well, let's take a look at some video of you at KNXT. This
oh, my God.
We have a new special that we'll talk about in a moment that you are presenting now, and it's on Amazon and elsewhere. It's on everything, pretty much. And this is a clip taken from David's new special. You'll hear a voiceover, but there's some KNXT video in here.
Oh.
I don't think it's nice you laughing.
After making movies for 4 decades, Clint and Oscar were strangers.
40 years, 39 films, and how many Oscars have you won?
0.
Unforgiven changed all that in 1993, winning Best Picture and Best Director for Clint.
You don't have to worry, kid. I ain't gonna kill you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Clint Eastwood.
The American Film Institute has declared Clint Eastwood to be a national treasure, and so he is. But I had no idea of that myself years ago. In fact, I spent half of my career in friendly arguments with Clint about violence on screen.
Did he fire 6 shots or only 5?
Don't you ever worry, though, about glorifying and glamorizing violence in your films?
No, I don't think we glorify it.
That was way back in the 70s.
I think we show it as though we certainly have never balleted it and tried to make it look appetizing. I don't think we've glorified it, no. I think Dirty Harry is a very romantic film. I think everybody would like to believe that there's a Dirty Harry on every street corner in case they were molested in some fashion.
Now you know why they call me Dirty Harry.
I want to make films that people can escape with. Can go, a guy comes home from a hard day's work, takes his girl, they go to a flick. They should go on a trip somewhere. I should take them on a trip somewhere.
But why do you always end up taking them on a violent trip?
I guess it's just the type of things I play. Maybe I do them better than I do something a little calmer.
You think that's true?
I don't know. Possibly.
I was just picking you some flowers.
Oh?
Men still do that, don't they? I'm not out of date, am I?
Was it a particular pleasure for you to show this gentle, tender side of Clint Eastwood?
I don't know. I have a tender side, I guess.
Mhm.
Everybody does. I have a romantic side, like I think everyone does. Some people are afraid to show it, but I'm not. I'm a slob at heart.
Are you really?
Yeah.
A romantic at heart?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's talk about the love scenes for a minute. We're really not used to seeing Clint Eastwood do love scenes. Therefore, I guess you're not used to doing them.
Who says I'm not used to doing them?
Well, in movies.
Oh, in movies. Oh, that's right.
Now, we see two things in here that I think are familiar to your viewers. One, we see the familiar Sheehan humor, but we also see something that was a recurring theme throughout your work, which is, from the very beginning, an ongoing, year after year, crusade against screen violence. This was a big issue of yours and a recurring theme in all your work. Where does that come from? Talk about that.
Well, it came just from my own personal experience, because that was my job. I had to see movies. It sounds stupid to say this, but it was real difficult. I had to see at least five, sometimes 4, sometimes 6 movies a week. I had to find a place in my schedule and the studio schedule. They would screen it for me or whatever in order to fulfill my contract, right? So because I couldn't review the movie without sitting through it. And I found after, I don't know, the first 6 months or so, that sitting through the violent stuff was really bothering my everything, my metabolism, my sense of life, my sense of everything. It was just the assault. And during that time, there was just the beginning of the death wish, Charles Bronson, Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry. That was just beginning. That big screen violence became a seller, and so since people bought tickets and it went into the high ranks of the weekly box office charts, more and more were being made, which meant I had to sit through more and more. And so I became kind of, I don't know, what did you even call it? And then I went to therapy, as a matter of fact. And then through psychotherapy, the therapist suggested that I go back to my days as a student and educate myself. This is before, remember, but this is before the internet, way before. So I had to go to the library and study up on what studies have been done at the Mayo Clinic or Sloan Kettering or wherever on the effect of screen violence or watching violence on the individual human being. And boy, there were some incredible studies. And so I put those studies on the air in the middle of a movie review, and some people thought, he has really lost his mind now, baby. What drug is he on, I wonder, you know? But I managed to work them in there with the citation. Mayo Clinic has done the study, and they show that there is nerve damage. One of the key things was there were 4 studies, and I could say this a lot shorter than I am now, because I had to get off the air in a minute 45, right? The study showed that three studies showed definitely that a certain amount of indulgence of screen violence produced in that person who views it a greater tolerance for real life violence, both as a witness and as a perpetrator. And I said, well, that's pretty significant. Now, you guys out there in TV land, you really want to subject yourself to that? For what purpose? To go see somebody's head blown off, or decapitation, or mutilation, bloodshed? What is the point? And I had a confrontation like that, but I had a more difficult one with Charles Bronson, who told me to F off on screen. We don't make our movies for people like you, Mr. Sheehan. And I got him to come on the news to retaliate, or rebut rather, all my reviews of Death Wish and the like. So what was the question?
Well, that covers it pretty well. Now let's remember, KNXT is CBS owned and operated station in those days, and this is your first job, and it's a big assignment. In addition to negatively reviewing a lot of films, violent films, you didn't hesitate to negatively review CBS programs. You called the new Bill Cosby Show, which is the one before the Cosby Show, you called it a program that looked as if it had been written by high school dropouts. You said Gunsmoke should have been blown away years ago. Doris Day was little more than a peaches and cream cutie. How did it go at CBS when you started tagging the programs on the primetime lineup?
Well, what were you reading from there? Time or
That's one of the
Time magazine.
pieces, yeah.
It got me in Time magazine, which
That's all that matters, really.
well, no, not in retrospect. More than that matters, but at the time, I'm a young kid, you know, and to be written about in Time magazine, and also Life. In Life magazine, the headline was "Biting the Hand That Feeds Him." This guy is being paid by CBS, goes on the nightly news and tells people, don't watch the show on CBS tonight. There's a better thing on NBC. Unheard of. And so they got a lot of good press. This is another example of the first entertainment reporter. They have a PR, it's more than PR though, it's marketing, I don't know, branding kind of a department of very intelligent, highly educated people who do things like the claim, he's the first entertainment reporter in the history of television. They're like, in the history of television. Well, when I started with the idea, let's review the new TV season and leave the movies aside for a second, or for a week or whatever it was, and they said, oh yeah, that's revolutionary, let's do that. Nobody's ever done it before, and nobody had ever reviewed television on television before, according to but Paul Brownstein will probably come up with a contradiction to that any minute. He's looking at his phone now, trying to Google, wait a minute, what's the first one? But they claim, again, the CBS branding publicity populations department claimed, this is the first time in the history of television anyone has ever reviewed television on television. So for a while, it was just wonderful, a lot of support because we're making a breakthrough. But boy, about, what was it? I'd say 1 year into that, the other people, they have another department there at CBS. I think it's called sales. I don't know exactly, but they sell something called commercials, and they had some cancellations, especially in the Cosby Show and shows like that, where I would say this is a terrible show, and you should. They actually had cancellations, and as that occurred and then recurred, the thinking of the executive level management people kind of slowly altered. And they looked at Sheehan like, I don't know about that guy, but at least I had enough defenders. It's not his, he's not the fault. You guys all supported it. You wanted to say, yeah, that's a good idea, David, because it's the first time in history. So don't burn his ass. So yeah, but anyway, the end of the story is that ended inside of a year. There was no more reviewing television on television because it had an impact on revenue. And the impact was very negative. I have no idea what the dollar amount was, but it was significant enough to be called into the carpet of the hierarchy. Would you mind stopping that? I said, no, I don't mind. I work for you. But I also work for myself. But you want me to stop that? Sure, I'll go back to just doing movie reviews. But maybe you could allow me then to add music to my repertoire. They said, okay, you do music, but no more TV. And so then I began to do the Coconut Grove and nightclubs and Ray Charles and all kinds of different things that I'd never done before. In addition to musicals, I did Les Mis and all the Cats 100 times, and that was all the result of them hating the biting the hand that feeds him kind of reviewing television shows. No more television shows. Don't even mention television shows. Don't touch television shows. Okay, but I got to do music in place of that, but still constantly movie reviews were the staple.
Carson, let's take a look at number 3, please.
Oh my God.
I've always been frustrated, even when I started when I was 18 years old, when you can't do that. You can't wear those clothes you're wearing. Why don't you have your nose done? You should change your name. And I just always believed in in my own truth. I mean, this is who I am, you know. I was born with this nose. My name is Barbara Streisand. I can't change it to Barbara Sands. I couldn't live with myself.
Ageless endeavors, no more hunger and thirst. First be a person who needs people.
And the different faces of Barbara Streisand.
Yeah, there's someone who's the insecure part, and there's someone who's confident.
Mm-hmm.
I know both faces of that.
Still today?
Oh, yeah.
You still have the insecure part too?
Of course.
Yeah? About the way you look?
I'm human.
You're human?
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Yeah?
I don't, actually, now I've realized I don't appreciate how good I looked 20 years ago. What do you think of how I look?
I think you're beautiful.
But don't you think I'm odd looking?
Odd? No, I would not use the word odd.
Well, I mean...
A funny choice.
Well, you know, I mean, I think my face is quite different from different angles. I think
Uh-huh.
I can look pretty good, and then from certain angles, I don't.
The way we were.
I had a difficult childhood, yeah, like a lot of people.
In what way?
I wasn't supported. I wasn't given any self-esteem. I wasn't told I was good, smart, pretty, anything that...
It doesn't mean you have to go out and become Barbara Streisand, right?
Yeah, Barbara Streisand.
Now, I chose that clip. You talked about going to therapy a moment ago. That clip is a kind of on-screen therapy. In your various meetings with her, we see her talking through insecurities and sort of unfulfilled needs from her past that have driven her to be able to perform and create in a very dramatic way. And when you talk to people who are artists, creative artists in many fields, oftentimes there's something from childhood or whatever, there's some kind of yawning chasm of need that they fill up by seeking acceptance in a way that oftentimes makes for great art. You have a lot of chats in your oeuvre of people talking very introspectively. How often did you find that people seem to come to performance from a kind of need?
Oh, that's a tough one. But as long as you're leading into that sort of thing, I think we should do one little plug. The name of the show, the brand new show, the interviews may be old, but these aspects that I have went to great lengths to discover the heart and soul of these people, thanks to our executive producer, Kellyanne Chippendale, who's really the nucleus of that thought. I've been doing And the Winners Are every year since 1994, but hey, you know, do something different. Maybe the same show because it's about the Oscars and the Oscar winners and what it means to win or lose and all that stuff, and who won last year and who's going to win it and all that kind of Oscar current. And her idea was, you got these people sitting with you for 5, 6, 7 minutes every time. Why don't you go back to the vault and see if you can find humanity, the humanity of celebrity, and things like that. So that's really how the current show came to be, and why I can call the current show a new show, even though it's made up of old interviews. It's parts that we never touched on because you would never play that on the news. That you got to get on and off, and I never thought of it either. And Kellyanne Chippendale thought of it, and we produced it. And the name of it is And the Winners Are. It's the same name, but this one's got an exclamation mark at the end. You'll notice. Nobody will notice that, right? And it is a compilation of 33 big-name superstar Oscar winners who open up, just like Barbara did, one way or another. Al Pacino says, I'm full of self-doubt, man. The different things, but I'm not going to do a teaser for you. My own talking trailer. But each and every one of the 33 reveals something, even like Clint just did, about his romantic side and so on. They reveal something that you didn't know, and somehow in experiencing the revelation, it humanizes us, the viewer. Oh, they're just people like me. They just were born with a better looking face, or they got some lucky breaks, and But they had to work hard, and now they're movie stars. But they're still just human beings. So it brings you, I hope anyway, into a human dimension as a viewer, you know, as opposed to Entertainment Tonight and Access Hollywood and all the extra blah, 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 where they fawn over the celebrity and the celebrity money and all this stuff, clothes, whatever, cars, to such an extent that the viewer ends up feeling less than as a result of just watching that little half hour on TV at 7 o'clock or whatever. You come away with, wow, I wish I was something other than what I am. Whereas my show, I think, you had to send me an email after you watched it on Amazon Prime Video, plug. Whether I'm right, you come away saying, wow, we're just all human beings. We're all in this together. Each one of us trying to find our own personal particular way, path. What do I do? And which also led me to Pippin, which Paul Brownstein, by the way, is going to give a whole new life as a result of his distribution expertise. And Pippin is a Broadway musical that I had involvement with way back when with Bob Fosse. But what drew me to that, and still does, is the question of what should I do with my life? And to have that question set to music and wildly imaginative, exponentially explosive choreography and beautiful songs like Gotta Find My Corner of the Sky by Stephen Schwartz, it's just a thrill. And it's another humanizing. And this is a 2-hour humanization where my show's only 82 minutes. But but it's still my show, even though it's Bob Fosse's show and Stephen Schwartz's show. And there's another first. That was the first Broadway musical. And this we checked out. Or Les Paul has a contradiction. You have anything? The first Broadway show ever filmed during live performance in history. We did it in 1979-80. It was a play that won 5 Tony Awards in 1972, and we restaged it in 1979, and nobody had ever done that. Since then, there Ain't Misbehavin' and Sweeney Todd, there have been many Broadway plays and musicals that have been photographed during stage performance, but Pippin was the very first one. That's also on Amazon Prime Video, and thanks to Paul Brownstein, it will be all over the place, even more so. Was that too much plugging?
That's fine. Let's pick up a clip of Bob Fosse.
Oh, my God. Oh, I interviewed him, too.
Bob Fosse is the creative genius behind many major musical hits like Chicago and Sweet Charity and Cabaret. And he is the man who choreographed his own sense of what dying would be like in the award-winning movie All That Jazz in 1980, 6 years before his own death from a heart attack in 1986. Fosse was a complex man of the theater who didn't give many interviews. Back in the 80s, though, Fosse did consent to talk with me about the nature of his genius and his chain-smoking workaholic lifestyle.
Like anyone else, I'm afraid of failure, although I don't think that's the major thing. And afraid that the ideas that I have, I don't have the talent to execute.
Can we try the whole shot once?
I think I would like to do better things, better quality things, more important things, and at the same time there's a fear that I don't have the equipment, the talent, the intelligence to bring them off.
You still have that fear, having proven and overcome that question so many times? Cabaret, Lenny, All That Jazz, and Sweet Charity.
I don't know how it works on other people, but it's just, yes, I do. You know, like Chaplin said, all of us are amateurs. None of us live long enough to be anything else. But every time I start on something new, it's like day one. How do we do this? I mean, and in dancing, it should be easy. You got a left foot and a right foot. You say, well, you got to step off on one of those. The decision shouldn't be that hard to make.
But you've proven so many times already. I mean, it's up there. It's on film. It's been on stage. The proof of your talent and expertise and an overwhelming skill. It seems manifest. Huh?
Let me ask you, how many directors, choreographers you've seen have brilliant shows or movies, and then the next 8 things they do are right down the drain? I mean, this business is loaded with such stories. Isn't it? It could happen. Could happen to me easily.
Do you have any real regrets about any of it? The life of obsession and compulsion?
I've learned to live with it. You know, at my age, you can't alter your behavior that much. I don't think. I mean, I try, but I don't think I can. So the best thing is to say, well, this is what I have, and this is the kind of person I am. So I guess I'll live the rest of my life that way.
You're doing a good job. Thank you.
From you, that's a compliment I really appreciate. Thank you. Now, you mentioned it. You implied, you didn't quite really reveal it, though. You actually left news for a while to do some producing, and you actually produced the televised version of this famous musical. And you did some other work, too. How did you, because a lot of people who were involved in reviewing Hollywood, who later tried to work in Hollywood, it was a tough go. Pauline Kael had trouble, as a producer. What prompted you to leave the news and get involved in producing?
I don't know. It must be a character flaw, because it was almost exactly the neurological internal bump that kept bumping like a spiritual reminder. Was exactly the same as the day that I reviewed Zoo Story in the small theaters in L.A. and said, "Boy, I could do that better." Then after 10, 11 years of reviewing movies on television, on the news, I kept saying, "Boy, I could do that better." And then I said, "Okay, I quit. And I'm going to go do that better, see if I can." Well, I was not successful in making a movie. Nothing would sell. And then I got the idea when I did a special report for Showtime. I sold them a show because now I was running out of money. I sold them a show called Showtime in Cannes, the Cannes Film Festival on the French Riviera. And that's where I really got close to Fosse. And it just happened coincidentally, that was the year that All That Jazz won the Palme d'Or, which is the Golden Palm Grand Prize of the Cannes Festival. So he was very up, being a prize winner, and he had a standing ovation for All That Jazz. So we developed a kind of a rapport. As you saw there, we were a little bit friendly, but he was a difficult man. But that gave me the idea that maybe I'm not a movie producer, because I absolutely failed in 6 months, and that's about all the time I was giving myself, which was stupid, but that was the way the thing worked. I think I'll do thing. That's why I talked to him about how you like to have, what I said at the bar of the Carlton Hotel after the interview, of all the things you've done, Cabaret, Lenny, All That Jazz now, and so on, so what's nearest and dearest to your heart? And he said, "Oh, Pippin. Pippin is in a coma." Uh-huh, what? What's that? Well, Pippin only exists in the minds and hearts of those who've seen it. It'll never be a movie. It doesn't lend itself to movie making. It's gone and forgotten, and I think of it as being in a coma. And of course, little David G in there. "Hey, Bob, let's revive it. How would you like to immortalize it?" And that's a long story that may get boring, because I said, just learned about this new thing coming up called pay TV, which was new. And I mean, people were still using, dropping quarters into boxes in their bedrooms to watch TV. That's what pay TV was when it began. But I got $2 million from Rockefeller to remake Pippin, and Fosse was thrilled. "We're going to immortalize my beloved." And he kept saying, "Beloved, oh, the show, oh." And there's many, many stories on that, but you're in charge of the time.
I am. Thank you, sir. With that in mind...
Oh, Pippin is on Amazon Prime Video also, by the way. But as I say, did Brownstein leave? No, there he is. He's going to take it to greater heights. I don't know, heaven maybe?
Well, speaking of that, we want to talk to the audience in just a moment, but let's take a look at one more clip, Carson.
I ate guacamole, so don't get too close.
Oh, good.
They had guacamole out there.
And I
It's
had onions
ridiculous
in
with
my
all that
scrambled eggs.
garlic.
So we can't get too
It's
close
like,
at all.
what's going on?
I've come here to like worship at the shrine.
Oh, stop.
No, you're so gifted. Come on, you got to thank somebody for that.
Oh.
You're amazing.
Okay. Yeah.
And I know you didn't do it by yourself. You had help from the heavens.
That's what it is.
Is there a way, though, that you can articulate what it is you get in touch with personally to bring out this tremendous diversity and range of characters?
I choose things now, I think, more than before when I was starting out. It's so much about instinct, and it's just saying this is where I'm at emotionally.
Well, that's interesting enough, Mr. Trickle. But it's just not my specialty. Come with me. I do love you.
You had to tap into this lady and her sense of longing, and
Yeah.
she wanted this other
Her
life.
desire to, I mean, she's trapped, you know, she's trapped by the world she's in, and she's looking to, but she knows nothing else. And that's what I found interesting, was the conflict within her, is that she wasn't allowed to fall in love.
Can you relate to that yourself in any way?
I think you can relate to every character you play.
Yeah, you have to, huh?
Yeah. Otherwise, it's not going to ring true to an audience.
You mentioned heaven, a higher power, a moment ago. You talk about that in this clip. That's something that comes up again and again as you talk to celebrities, the concept of being gifted, being talented. There's a difference in being in skill and talent, skill and a gift, right? Skill is something you earn, a gift or talent is something you are bestowed with or is bestowed upon you. How do you feel about that? Your own skill, your own accomplishments over the years in the field, is this some talent you were born with, or do you think it's hard won and hard earned?
Oh, no, there's no question. For me personally, and I think it's true for all these folks too, that you start off with the DNA gift that you, like, I can in no way take credit for the way my brain works. I was born with that brain, and like I'm never unhappy. The wives I've had have been so angry with me at times that you always have to whistle, you always have to be so damn happy. And I can understand their frustration, because most people, or at least some of the women I married, were not constantly happy. I've even been diagnosed as being unipolar on a bipolar scale of called hypomania, which is a mental condition that has to do with the neurological vibrations and whatever you call it in your brain. It's a brain situation that's clearly a product of birth. I think you could probably alter it maybe with drugs or electrodes, but I didn't. Thank goodness. I tried to with cocaine for a little while, but that didn't work out. but you're born with that, whatever you would call it. You said gift, yeah, giftedness, gifted. I've certainly been gifted. They've all been gifted. Some with good looks, some with a certain quality of voice, tonality, some with body language, some with some instinctive charm. Charm people, you know. There's some kind of, at birth, gift given, you might say. But then you got to work on it. That's where the skill thing comes in. Then you got to develop it. You can't just, sit back and okay, whatever happens. You got to work to keep it polished, to develop it further, to see where it applies. Where are your particular gifts? Because I wanted to be many different things, but my gifts didn't apply. But boy, when I zeroed in on that little word with my dad, when I said, "Daddy, what's that mean, B-Y?" and I got this byline, I know. Well, that put it all together for me, because that's all I've been doing since that day at 5 years old, is seeking a byline. Still today, I'm here with you seeking another byline. That you watch my show on Amazon Prime Video, which is another byline. And so finding your niche, your niche. Is it niche or shadow? How do you pronounce niche? Okay. Bailiwick. Right. Anyway, yeah, that's how I would answer that. I think it's true for all those people too, but I can't really speak for them. But they speak to me, and that's on video. So you have to draw your own conclusions from the way they say it.
Well, with that, we have the mingling microphone, and I'm the one who'll do the mingling. So if anyone wants to join us in the conversation, I'll come down and please do, okay? And we would love a raised hand if you have one. Anyone? You look like a conversant guy. Yes, share with us your thoughts, please.
Well, I'm a big fan of Frank Sinatra. I never had a chance to meet him like you did. Did you interview Frank on screen?
No, he would never do it. He even though I was his mascot and his buddy and his defender, of course, in those days I wasn't really doing television. I was a print guy still. I was UPI, and he did some interviews with me for UPI, but they were print. I had no inkling that I would ever be on television, and I would never have dreamt of it. So there was no question of that. But he was even shy about doing print interviews. He says, I've been misquoted so many times, David. I trust you and you're a cool guy, but you're so fucking young, I don't know if I can trust you. And so he did some, though, especially when I wanted to do a feature story for UPI about the idea of movie stars and celebrities being involved in a political campaign. That became a little bit of an issue, and it had a potential to have a negative impact on the JFK campaign. So as soon as I proposed that to him, he said, oh, yeah, because he really wanted Jack to win. And so that was the only lengthy interview I've ever done with him.
Okay, back here.
Hi there. In regards to interviewing skills, there's a fine line between confronting someone you're interviewing and talking to them in a way that you can get them to open up with you rather than attacking them. What did you learn along the way, and what were your skills or approaches to get people to be so honest with you?
Did everybody hear that question? What skill did I develop to get people to be honest? I don't know. It was a gift of my idea. I was a lot of instinct. I can't take credit for coming up with a precise technique. I was just natural. I remember certain touchstones along the way when I started first getting the job on KNXT, which is now KCBS, as you know, Channel 2. When I first started doing that stuff, doing the interviews that sometimes would go along with the release of a new movie, I would go to their house, and then eventually came the junkets where you would go to a hotel, and I know, and then you get to see other reporters work, and I noticed I would sit there with these spiral notebooks with a bunch of questions, and they're talking to somebody, and they're, and then they're asking this question, and I said, whoa, that's not the way to do it. So I had a sense of how not to do it. I would never walk into an interview with any kind of notes in my lap or in my coat or anywhere else, because immediately they're used to that and they hate it. The star hates it. They don't like these being interviewed anyway, but they have to do it by contractual obligation to publicize and promote the movie they just made or so forth, right? So I started by realizing what the other guys do wrong. And so I just will eliminate. I'll never have a notebook or a list of questions or a lot of preconceived notions. And then the only one single thing that I would say has been my key is listening. I don't think my questions are the key. The key was really listening, but in a kind of more profound sense than just LISTE, where you kind of get the person, and then they feel you getting them. And there's an interesting vibe goes on. I can't explain it, but it's definitely there because I've experienced it so many times. Not always, but so many times. And most of the all the 33 interviews in the show were those kinds where I felt the vibe from them, they felt the vibe from me, and there's something about any human being, famous, rich or not, they like to be listened to. They really do. It's a good feeling. This other human being is paying attention to me. just to me, not to my fame or fortune or the movie I'm in or the car I drive or whatever. They're just, that guy's listening to me. It's something like that. Something like that. I don't know.
Well, everything you're saying is so valuable, and I'm learning so much. Besides Sinatra, though, because you've interviewed everyone, and I know, I'm fortunate to say I know a lot of the great legends that you've interviewed. Is there anyone that you really wanted to interview that you tried several times and they wouldn't do it? Or
Yeah, well, yes. May I introduce you?
Oh, sure.
This is Stanley Kramer's daughter, who goes by the name of
Kat.
Pardon?
Katharine Hepburn, but I go by the name of Kat.
Right, but your whole name is
Katharine.
Katharine Kramer.
Yes, yeah.
Which leads you to a KK monogram on the scarf I'm going to buy for you tomorrow morning. Well, I suppose Nicholson, even though I've done 4 with him, they weren't the 4 I wanted to do. He is the one guy, and I don't feel too rejected. I feel a little rejected by him, I guess, because he wouldn't do what I wanted. And if somebody won't do what I want, then I'm rejected, right? But I got over it. I wanted to sit down and do one of my typical sit-down, face-to-face explorations of life, love, and the pursuit of cinematic glory, or whatever. But he kind of fascinates me because he just wouldn't go there. But when you see the show, you'll see the 4 interviews that I did get with him, and you'll see kind of how accidental they were. One day, he got his star, for example, and this is in the show, he got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, right? And so the news director of KCBS, Channel 2, said, "Sheehan, can you just drop that review you're doing and run over to the Chinese theater and do a quick live shot for the 4 o'clock news?" I said, "Oh, I don't like live shots. I don't get to prepare nothing." Come on, man, do it for us. It's a good thing, and NBC's not doing it, and neither is Channel 7. We'll have a promotable, teasable story that we can run at 4, 5, 11, and the next day. Because the next day was a weekend where they repeat everything anyway. I think it was a Friday. So I said, okay. I didn't really want to go. But I got there, and there's Nicholson, and he said, "Sheehan, I like your shit, man. I really do. You know, you're something else. You do that thing. You call him magazine." I said, yeah, can we talk a minute? And I said, "Oh, I don't talk. You'll see this in the show." He says on camera, "I don't do these things. I don't do interviews. I don't want to talk." I said, "But here you are, Jack, the Hollywood Walk of Fame. You showed up for that, and you even did, 'Here's Johnny,' for the crowd. So come on, you got some connection." "Well, yeah. I mean, what's it like to be as famous as you are?" "Well, I don't know." And anyway, I'm not going to attempt to replicate his interview, but it's in the show. But even that, and then he did another one when, what was that movie? This Is As Good as It Gets, and another one where I would talk to him, but at the red carpet. He would never go into a room and sit down with me, and never did. Is he still alive? I think so. And maybe never will, because I don't want to do any more interviews. I got new things to do. But, yeah, that was, so anyway, to answer your question, I hope it did. That's the one frustration. Other than that, I've never had anyone say no. But Nicholson has said sort of a schizoid no, because he's done 3 interviews with me, but they're not really the interviews I wanted to do. But they are charming if you see them in the show. They're very unusual. He talks about, I said, "What's it like to be famous?" "Well, it's not doing me much good anymore." I said, why not?" "Oh, I don't know, it makes me feel boxed." Anyway, he does all this physical stuff that's so fun to watch. It makes me feel boxed in, Dave. And he does that. I didn't do a very good job, did I? Shadow's looking at me saying, "Sheehan, you are so full of shit." I know, I'm not an impressionist, so stop trying to be one. Okay. Thank you.
David, before we go to more questions, let's take a look at some of your clips with Jack Nicholson.
Oh, you have it?
A few.
Well, I think it's about time, yeah.
About Time is a long time with Oscar for Jack Nicholson, since the earliest 1970s, in fact, when Easy Rider got Jack his very first nomination.
Here's the first of the day, fellas.
Five Easy Pieces, his
I want you
second.
to hold it between your knees.
Last Detail, his third.
Call me badass.
Chinatown, his fourth.
What's the matter with you?
And the first big Jack Nicholson win in 1976, Best Actor for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
I want that television set turned on right now!
Jack, could you talk a little bit about the character that you played, that you won for, the rebel against the system and all of that?
I read the book when it was originally published. Of course, I was too young to play the part then, but I've always liked this character. I don't think an actor can go wrong really playing a combination of Hamlet and Christ.
Nicholson's 12 nominations overall make him the most nominated guy in Oscar history, with other wins for supporting in Terms of Endearment, 1984, and his second Best Actor Oscar for getting into the world of OCD in As Good as It Gets in 1998.
If you want to see me, you will make an appointment.
Dr. Green, how can you diagnose someone as an obsessive-compulsive disorder and then act as though I had some choice about barging in?
Mr. Nicholson, sir.
Thank you
Could
so
you just
much.
tell us a little about it from your heart of hearts, what this feels like, what the Oscar means to you at this point in your life?
Well, you know, it's changed in a certain, and you feel like you're running for office. There's so many other award shows that you actually want to win by the time you get here. You know?
Nicholson's biggest shoulda won but didn't, even though nominated, has to be 1993's A Few Good Men.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
And his should have been nominated but wasn't has to be Something's Gotta Give in 2003 as an older guy dating younger women until he falls for Diane Keaton.
What? I'm impressed.
Women your age love that about me.
How would you describe what you like most about this guy?
Well, he's charming.
Yes.
Honest. Witty. Women love him. Audiences love him. And he's wealthy.
David?
The best interviews are later at the Hollywood Walk of Fame, where he says, I don't do this.
David, of all of these interviews you've done over the year, who intrigued you the most and why?
Oh, that's a tough one. Who intrigues me the most? I don't know that I'm really intrigued at all. I just feel very grateful that I've had this kind of career, and I would not want to single out one of those people who were good enough to share their lives, their thoughts, and their feelings with me, because to single out one would be to diminish the others, I think. But no matter what, I wouldn't have that. They've all been so good to me, and I consider it a stroke of luck and just accident of sparks that flew and connected. I don't know. I can't take a lot of credit like I did some great technique-y trick or something. It was all natural, and they were natural. There were a few that weren't, and they're not in the show. I left them on the cutting room floor. There were a few people, you know, and I don't want to name names, but who I just didn't like to interview because they were just doing nothing but marketing. They weren't doing humanity or discussion or conversation or dialogue. They were doing, soundbite stuff. And sometimes I couldn't get them out of that. And so then, okay. I did what I did, but I didn't put them in my show because I only chose 33. You might imagine that we have 3,000 tapes, and I only chose 33. Well, we have 3,000 tapes, but that wouldn't necessarily mean 3,000 people. It would probably be, say, average three tapes per person, so it would be maybe 1,000 actual interviews, and I picked out of the 1,033. And I feel good about the 33 I picked. I have no second thoughts. Oh, I wish I'd have done this. Well, there's a couple that, I left George Clooney out, and then I've gotten to know him, and then he connected my shows with his press agent, Stan Rosenfield, and that was kind of nice. And I said, damn, maybe I should, because his interviews were nice. He, as I asked him about, his dad was his dad was the anchor man on Channel 4, Nick Clooney, and who also helped me with the teleprompter, by the way. And Nick and I, he one day, a long time ago, said, my boy wants to be an actor, David, and you're kind of plugged into the Hollywood scene. What would you advise? And I sent him to a couple workshops, and he never forgot that, George. Without you, Sheehan, I wouldn't be here, because I went to that damn workshop you told me to go to, and I hated every minute of it, but I learned, and I learned, and I learned. And so, but I left him out of the show because he never really won Best Actor. He won some other things that I could have contrived the narration, but I didn't. Anyway. Yes?
Dave, I think I speak for everybody saying this has been just terrific. Fabulous, just fabulous.
Thank you.
But there are three things that struck me the most. First one is, I too started in a Catholic seminary. That's a slip, isn't it?
Nomine Patri, Filii, Spiritus Sanctus.
Yes. Juventutem meo.
Yeah.
But a girl never asked me what was under my cassock.
You missed it, man.
And the only other Hollywood person I've ever heard that started out was Pat McCormick, the writer. Yeah, so the three of us. Number two, like I have always done things that I thought that I might be able to do, even though it looked ridiculous and was very different from what I was doing. It's just a way of life, and when you're talking about that, I identify with it so much, because I think the key to life is to find out what you do a little better than most other people in the world, and then keep doing that and keep doing it over and over again. And number three, I too have that bipolar condition that you have with only one pole, and I am happy all the time too, and I have driven my one wife absolutely crazy for almost 50 years.
Oh, all right. What was the question?
I spent 13 years with Barbra Streisand, and I have to tell you something. That is the absolute best interview ever. Because she,
Thank you.
being the head of Columbia Records, she tortured me.
Wow.
And I love her. And Marty Ehrlichman, her
yeah.
manager,
Yeah.
who had to give you the okay to do that, you
bet.
were able to sit there with her when she told me, and Shotgun knows this story, that I was absolutely the worst promotion man ever in Chicago because I couldn't get secondhand rows played on WLS. So I went to the radio station, and she asked me not to show up at Mr. Kelly's, her first performance in Chicago. Here I am, the local promotion man for Columbia, inviting all the radio people, all the press, and she asked me not to come because I couldn't get secondhand rows played. So I went to WLS as a punk promotion man and said, do me a favor, prove this bitch, is what I said, wrong, and play the B-side at 8:05. She goes on the stage at 8:15. Went in the dressing room, put a portable record radio in there. They got on the radio at 8:05 and said, we never do this, but for Ronald Luxembourg, he asked us to play the B-side. Welcome to Chicago, Barbara, and you're going to have to sing this for the rest of your life. The B-side of Secondhand Rose was People.
Oh, wow, that's a
And
great...
that interview that you
Whoa.
did, I can't wait to tell her I saw a great interview. I compliment you and thank you for being here.
Thank you. That's a great story. Wow. People.
Would anyone else
people
like
who
to join
need
us
people.
before we wrap up? Okay. Well, then with that in mind, we will have one final clip. David, you and I have both interviewed a lot of people on broadcast, myself more on radio, yourself more on television. Sometimes it goes very well, and sometimes it goes poorly.
Uh-oh, you got a bad one now?
Let's take.
This is the kicker at the end.
Sometimes you get an interview subject who's a little eccentric or has his own agenda or isn't listening, something of that nature. Let's take a look at when it's challenging.
Uh-oh. I don't even know what he's going to do.
Do you still get a charge out of acting?
I don't really honestly want to talk about it.
You want to talk about it? Okay.
I don't think it's relevant. I think this is precious time. Whatever time you're going to use out of this is precious to me. And I'd like to ask you a question. Why are you doing this show?
Just to be able to get some insights into the people who are really in positions of power and influence and strength. But when we talk about power, though, do you find that within Hollywood you can use your power and whatever influence you have to get a different kind of picture made?
You can use it, but how good is it? Is it any good? Only history's going to tell that.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
I think as a means to an end, apropos of you and a communicator, it's a useful profession. There is this question of whether or not you can use your end for ill or for good.
I was so struck with your beauty that I thought perhaps I could offer you a glass of champagne.
There is this seismic wave that is rising, and the tide is at the flood now. And if we don't use our instruments, if we don't use our networks, if we don't use our motion pictures to promote a sense of brotherhood, to try to find the common denominator of what our problems are with one another.
You want me my philosophy of life? Do it to him before he does it to you.
But how do you feel about your own life and your own career now? Do you feel like you have used it?
Well, I think that I'm getting a little long in the tooth now, and I think the industry is too, and I think we're all getting, philosophically, a little long in the tooth to be able to be playing games with something as potent as this instrument, this medium. So we've got to be, all of us, much more responsible, and we've got to listen to one another. Because if I just go on blabbering and not listen to what you have to say, you haven't interrupted me once here in this interview, and I hope you'll keep that in. Because it's important for you to say, wait a minute, Marlon, because this is a time for dialogue. It's a time for the sound man. I don't know what your name is. I forgot your name.
That's Leroy.
I think it's time for all you guys to interrupt, and this, we got a drop format. Marshall McLuhan's hair would stand on end if he saw what we were doing here. Because that's the thing we need to do, is to break format and to break formula, so that even while I'm saying something that you think is provocative and say, God, this is going to make a hell of a point in the show, or this is really interesting, we got him going now. The hell with that. If somebody disagrees, then you got to speak up. You got to say what it is. He's got his glasses up, peering at me through the camera, and he's got to say, hey, wait a minute, Marlon, I think this is wrong and that's wrong. Because if it isn't a world of dialogue and exchange between people, if it's just people like me pontificating and shooting my mouth off all the time, then we're in for a hell of a lot of trouble. We got to hear from everybody.
But anyway, to interrupt you a moment.
Oh, you're doing that on cue. Take that.
And a reminder, once again, many of the clips you saw today are in David's new special, and the winners are streaming on Amazon and almost any other streaming platform where you can buy content. And with that in mind, David Sheehan, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you. There you go. Thank you all for being so attentive and even caring about anything I had to say. I hope you were amused at least and not too bored. But thank you so much for being here.
One more time for David Sheehan.
Yeah, look at a standing ovation